At a time when tensions in Syria continue to mount, a new documentary is providing an intimate look at the uprising in Aleppo. In 2011, protests took place against Bashar al-Assad's government. By 2016, the United Nations was advising people in the area to leave.
Sama tells the story of Wad al-Khatib, who was raising her children in Aleppo at the height of that conflict, and she joins us now to discuss the documentary, which she filmed, and its significance. And she's joined by Edward Watts, co-director of the documentary. So glad to have you both.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Tell us what people will see in the film.
Like, you will see actually 5 years of my life in Aleppo, like an experience of a female perspective and a motherhood. You will see the life as you will never seen before at the news. You will see like what Assad and Russia said about terrorists. You will see normal people like you, like anyone around the world, who we were just fighting for our best future.
So Edward, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this project and why you're so passionate about it.
So I only met Wad after the tragic events which are portrayed in the film were finished. So that was in early 2017. She came to London and no one realised that she'd created this incredible archive across 5 years, over 500 hours of footage. So when she arrived in London and met some of our colleagues from Channel 4 and PBS, revealed she had this archive, they were looking for a collaborator to work with her, and they came to me because I'm just so passionate about what's happened in Syria since the revolution began. As Wad says, you know, people like us, middle-class, educated people, were peacefully protesting for the rights that we all take for granted in the West, and being met with the most medieval, barbaric violence that we've seen, I would say, since the Second World War.
Yeah, so Wad, tell us a little bit about, when did you leave Aleppo? How were you able to escape, and what years were you there? What are some of the things that you saw?
Like, we left Aleppo in December 2016 when the UN with the Russian government and Turkish government forced us to leave.
Yeah.
We were sorry.
No, you're fine.
Okay, yeah. So we were displaced out after being besieged for 6 months by the Russian and Assad forces. And the last solution was from the UN was like just to leave, because they couldn't stop the horror and the attacks by Assad forces.
Yeah, I remember that time, actually.
What was that like as a mother? I just can't even imagine. You know, it's one thing to fear for yourself, but to fear for your kids.
Yeah, it's really like there was no place where you can protect yourself or your child. Even like the last days, the Russians started to use a rocket where it's like being exploded down under the ground.
Bunker bus,
so
yeah,
so even in the basement, there's no safe place. And just like the fact that you could have been killed at any moment, you don't know if Assad forces like came into the area where we were, and you can't imagine how the massacre would happen. It was just like, I don't know, it's like very bad nightmare. It's still happening until now, unfortunately, in Syria. That's happened with me 3 years ago, but still like now, like more than 3 million people who are living the same circumstances until now. So like imagine how many mothers and women still living the same situation.
Yeah. And we get so little in the way of images out because obviously it's so, so dangerous, and then there's crackdown on media, so it's been very hard to really see the true extent of what is going on there. I mean, Edward, connects this to the news that we've been, following here with the U.S. pulling back, what's going on with the Kurds and Turkey and Russia as well.
Well, I think one of the things that we feel is it's incredibly, it's good to see that America is re-engaging with what's going on in Syria, but it's not like the war ever went away. The war didn't finish. As Wad talks about, there's an area of the country northwest called Idlib, which is still out of the regime control, which has been subjected to the most relentless bombardment by the Russians and the Syrian regime while the world wasn't watching. And I think, the thing that we're trying to get across is it's great to see this bipartisan concern for the situation, again, what is happening with civilians and what's happening to the Kurds. But what we're trying to say is civilians across Syria are suffering at the hands of all sorts of different actors, and we as the West should be engaged in all of their fate, we have a stake in all of their struggles.
Yeah, I think, you're absolutely right, which is I cover this conflict from the very beginning, and the people only got concerned once domestic political concerns engaged it, and you're right, 500,000 people are died. Yeah. And not enough people talk about the barbarism that we saw over the years. Nobody cared. Everybody it was completely left behind, and I mean, and it was left to people like you to document it for us.
Yeah.
While people gave nice speeches at the UN.
Like it's so hard really for me to see now that's happening, and as I experienced this as a mother and as a woman, I don't want to see any more civilians in Syria having the same experience. But unfortunately now, if you just looked now in the US about the new people who are elected for the president, they are all start speaking about bring the relationship back with Assad regime, which is like, if we can't really stop this, at least we don't want these countries, all the Western countries, to still speak with the regime or deal with them as it's like a power. It's happening.
What do you want to
difficult
see? I mean,
situation.
what do you think the West should do? What's the responsibility and what's the right thing?
Like it's all the responsibility of all these countries who are watching this, and they let that happen as it's something normal. Bombing hospitals now is something acceptable around the world because you've seen all this, I don't know, really big attack directly, systematically attacking hospitals,
Right.
and all the world just watching. This is all the responsibility of all the countries, and you can't let that happen and then speak with Assad regime as it's the president of Syria. Like this is need to be accountability and justice, and at least if we couldn't really do something before, 3 years ago when we were trapped there, now you have a chance to see this story through the film, through Forsama, and you can know exactly what does that look like.
Yeah, I mean, we feel, that we understand that a lot of people think Syria is so complicated. They don't understand the full history of the conflict, and it's easy to fall into the trap thinking that everyone's as bad as each other. But if you can see the film, we encourage your viewers to do so. You see what this was about in essence, which is people just like them fighting for their freedom. And I think just making that connection with the humanity that we all share is a really important message for the American people to hear.
Tell people how they can see the film.
So it's going to be in cinemas here in DC.
And 8th of November.
Yeah, Friday the 8th, and
It will be also on PBS on 19th of November.
on Frontline. Yeah.
PBS Frontline,
Yeah.
November 19th. That's a great spot for it. Thank you
Yeah.
guys
Thank you.
both.
Thanks for having us.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have more Rising after this.